Hi everyone, how are you? Yeah, this is my daughter Mimi that I've brought along with me because we've all seen the news this week, and bringing, mixing children and serious interviews goes really well. So I thought, why not? I do comedy. It's just a bit out of what I do. This tends to be a bit serious, but they asked me to come and do a TED talk, and I said yes, because I heard Beyonce samples them, and could make me really famous. So I'm here to talk about comedy and stuff, and you will notice I'm a mother, and also wearing sensible shoes, a Mal Clooney, just a note for you. Because when you're a mother, the most important thing, and you're giving a speech, the most important thing is your footwear. I think the most important thing actually is she actually had a baby with someone interesting, which I didn't do. It's okay, he won't watch this, it's okay. The man can barely read. So, let's get on with this. Basically, I've come here to talk about comedy and offence in comedy. And because there are people out there who believe that as a comedian, you should have free rein and you should be able to say exactly what you want. I'm not one of the people that agrees with that. I believe there's people that would call it censorship. They've decided that if you try to censor a comedian, they're saying you can't censor humour. I get that. There's no mathematical formula for doing so. The way that I would say to do it is to, if you are punching up, and you are hurting the people above you who have more power than you, then that would make more sense than hitting down, basically. She just had to, didn't you? Just had to. It's fine, by the way. She's used to coming on stage. She's been coming on stage with me since she was 5 weeks old, so she's totally used to applause and laughter and all that. So you can do that. I don't like the way you laughed at that. So there is an absolute difference. I don't believe in censoring free speech, but I do believe in censoring hate. I think that there are comedians. There was a UKIP conference, and there was a comedian who I won't name, who was basically going up doing jokes about Asian people, jokes about minority people, jokes about Polish people and Muslims. And Nigel Farage, who's known for his humour, afterwards, he said, it's not fair. If you go around trying to censor humour, we're on a downward trajectory, which he is right about that, except there were people who didn't find his comedian particularly funny. I've been in comedy clubs when people have actually made the atmosphere quite dangerous for some of the patrons. I remember doing a comedy gig, and we were there, and I was the only female on the bill, and that is quite normal. Because when you have female comedians, what they do is they like to put us all on separate nights, so we don't spoil things. And so we can't be trusted. So I was the only woman on the bill. And what I was noticing was how anti-woman the atmosphere actually was. There was a guy that went up, he was the MC. He basically pointed out a table full of women, and they were out celebrating. You could see they had sort of silly hats on and balloons and stuff. It could have been someone's birthday. We don't know what it was. But he decided that they were out celebrating, probably because one of them had an abortion. He then decided to label them the table of slags. And every time he went up, he kept referring to them as the table of slags. And what I noticed happened was, during the break, there were other tables, like full of stags, so just like all male parties, that were actually going up to these women and trying to chat them up. And these women didn't want to know. And when these women didn't want to know, the men were getting angry with them because it had already been set up by this guy who thought he had a right to go and speak to them like that because that is how the MC of the night was speaking to them. I think situations like that cannot be allowed. I also see a lot of times comedians will ask something simple like, are there any couples in? And some people will say yes. And then they'll see two men sitting next to each other and they go, are you a couple? Because, that never happens. But they actually have immediately made the atmosphere quite homophobic. And they have also turned on people who actually paid their money to come into that club just to probably had a hard week at work, wanted, to have a few laughs, and they have been made they've been humiliated, essentially, by the person on stage. And I don't think that is acceptable at all. I think that as a comedian, it does not alleviate you from responsibility. You still have responsibility to the people that come to the comedy clubs, to the people that might be watching, which is not to intentionally hurt them. How do you do that, you may ask? Right, that is a very hard thing to quantify, because no doubt there are jokes that you can tell that it's going to offend somebody out there. Somebody is going to be offended by that, because you don't know what your audience is going through when you come onto the stage. So you might make a little a joke, and it might mention the word cancer or something, and somebody's actually come out that night because they have a relative that is ill with cancer. You can't plan for something like that. If somebody does approach you afterwards, I just don't think it's good enough just to turn around and say to the person, oh, it's only a joke. I think that comedy should be considerate, and we should take in people's feelings. How good would this speech be if I actually put my child to sleep? She's just going off. I think that you have to be, and I think especially in times like this, where you have an American president, Donald Trump. I know, I have to say it out loud because I still can't believe it. Like, what did the Americans do to us? Who is actually on television imitating a disabled person. And he is doing it in such a way that is so cruel and so nasty. And basically, he has lowered the standard, essentially. By doing things like that publicly, you're making people think it's okay. A lot of the arguments that you would get at the moment are political correctness has gone mad. Oh, you can't do anything anymore. That's not true. You can still do lots of things. One of the things that you can't actually do anymore is deliberately offend people. There's a reason why these laws have been put into place. They are to protect the most vulnerable in society. And it says a lot about a society. You can tell the measure of it by the way that we treat the most poor and the most vulnerable people amongst us. It really is putting her to sleep. Are you serious? I think, for instance, there are other people who get offended for reasons that you have to go, are you being serious? I'll give you an example. I have been complained about before, quite a few times actually. The joke that I made that got the most complaints of my career to date was a joke I told back in 2009 on the McIntyre comedy Roadshow. And I was talking about my experiences and the kind of hate mail that I get. I don't want to boast or anything, I get a lot. And so I had this email, and this guy I think he was trying to be inventive, because he was calling me all kinds of racist names. And after a little while, it becomes a little bit boring when you're getting this kind of racist hate mail. So you kind of read it and you try to see how inventive that they can be, you know, just to make a little bit of a change. So this guy, I think he was. So he wrote to me and he said, you've got no right to be going on stage doing your stupid comedy. Nobody wants to hear from you because you're nothing but a dumb niggerette. So I read that and my response was, well, you know, I've been called all kinds of things before, but I said I never actually knew that niggerette was a racial slur. What I had thought was niggerette was probably a patch that you would stick. You would stick on the arm of a black man to wean him off white women. Now, thank you. I thought it was a great joke. But interestingly enough, all the complaints that I got for telling that joke weren't actually about that joke. It wasn't from mixed-race couples that were offended. People wrote in and said, it's not fair that I'm allowed to say niggerette, and they're not. I was like, are these people being serious? It's like, oh, it's not fair. She's black, she's allowed to say niggerette. Why can't we say niggerette? I'm like, mate, practically nobody says niggerette. So just stop it. Why would you want to do that? Oh, it doesn't make any sense at all. I think you have to take into account the balance of power and also what's going on in society as well. I have some jokes that I would tell at certain times, and other times I would rest that joke, because I think at that point that if you're targeting somebody who really doesn't need that in their life at the moment. Like, for instance, I had a joke about Diane Abbott, which was a little lightweight joke, which I used to have, which I wouldn't tell at the moment because she's getting so much hate mail. And she said she feels like she can't walk down the street at night. She feels frightened for her life. And I've seen some of the social media and harassment that she gets, and I think it would be very irresponsible of me to go on stage sort of reinforcing people's views about her and making her life a little bit more difficult. And I don't think that makes you a worse comedian. People, I've spoken to other comics who've turned around and said, why should I have to do that? I shouldn't have to censor what I say. Well, I should tell the jokes when I want to. And I just think, you can be a comedian and also have a heart. I don't think it's too difficult. You can be a comedian and you could be... Sorry, this child sounds like Peppa Pig. I can't believe her. She's just snoring. Oh, dear. I bet you next year at TEDx they have no kids. You can still be a comedian and you can still be considerate to other people. What I find is when I hear comedians going, oh, I don't want to do comedy anymore, you can't say anything anymore, you can't say all these horrible things anymore. What I'm hearing that comedian say is actually, oh, it's not fair. I have to be a bit more inventive. I have to be a bit more creative. I actually have to write jokes and, my punchline can't be a racial slur. Oh, I don't think that's too difficult to do. I think it would actually improve comedy if people would do that, would write more creative jokes. And also from hearing from people from different backgrounds as well. Like the more comedians that we have who are out there, I know some amazing Muslim comedians who are out there at the moment, Amir Rahman, who is out there telling jokes from his perspective. And if all you ever read in the newspapers, if that's where your impression of Muslims came from, then, it would be... If that's where your impression of Muslims came from, it would be a very poor situation. Sorry. I just can't. She's so funny. Oh, dearie me. Right. So, in conclusion, when you go out to a comedy club and you go and see a comedian, I don't think it's too bad to be asking that comedian to have a little bit of social responsibility. I do think that we have... Sorry, I'm so distracted. Sorry. It's making me really hot. Can I... will you take this child, please? See. I brought one here to look cute. She just ruined everything for me. Thanks a lot, kid. Cheers. Bye. Thank you. I think what people have to note as well is that there is a balance of power when it comes to a comedian. There's a balance of power within the society, and a comedy club is part of that. A comedy club is where you can see, you can get a lot from people's attitudes in comedy clubs as to what is going on in the outside world. For instance, after there was a bomb scare, there was a very, very horrible atmosphere inside the comedy club for people who were Muslim or appeared to be Muslim, people who were brown and black, basically. And it was very, very tense. And I think as a comedian, you can actually go up on that stage and you can say something that could make the people who are in there watching you change their mind or think about things quite differently. One of the examples I had is one of my best friends is a Muslim woman and she wears the hijab, so she's visibly Muslim. And what I noticed, and I've noticed this across society and a lot of people probably have, is that very often when something happens and people who claim to be Muslim have accepted or have claimed responsibility for it, people turn around to the whole community and they will tell them to say sorry. And a lot of times people don't even think there's anything wrong with that. And you have to try to explain, why should one person apologise for the actions of somebody else who has got nothing to do with them, just for the fact that they share a religion, or they might share a skin colour, or they might share share sexual orientation. And I actually got really, really fed up with it. To point out how ridiculous it was. And where I got really annoyed was one night I was out with my friend and we were standing at a bus stop and we were minding our own business. And a woman that we didn't know was extremely aggressive and she started shouting across the road at my friend, saying, "You, oi, you, I want a word with you." And so we were thinking, who's she talking to? And she actually ran across the road and she pointed in my friend's face. And she touched her nose, which is rude. And she said to her, she said, "I want you to apologise for 9/11 now." And I was like, I was shocked. And so I had to stop. I said, you know when you hear something and you know you heard it, but you have to ask anyway. So I said, "What did you just say?" And she turned around to my friend again and she goes, and she points at her and goes, "I want her to say sorry for 9/11 right now." And I was horrified. And I looked at my friend and I went, "Oh my God, was that you?" Do you see? It makes no sense. It makes no sense whatsoever. So I will say, to end, seriously now, I do believe that as a comedian, you can change people's thoughts. And if you want to change people's thoughts, why not try and use your comedy to change people's thoughts for the better, rather than using it to reinforce stereotypes and make life difficult for other people in society who might not have it as good as you. Thank you.